Hello and welcome to the Game Dev Local Podcast. I'm your host, Oscar Clark, he, him, and I'm on a podquest to learn everything you wanted to know about game dev, but never dared to ask. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Darren, a fellow host on GDL. Darren, do you want to explain for anyone who's listening who doesn't already know who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thanks, Oscar. My name is Darren, he, him, also known as the Gaming Recruiter. And I have 10 years experience in game dev hiring. Started in software development hiring way back in 2011, 2012. And then came back to recruitment in 2020, where I've been ever since.
So you had a really good idea. I thought, given the time of year, we are coming close to the, but at least at the point where this gets released, we're getting closer and closer to the end of the year. And boy, what a year it has been. So let's have a explore around those things. To paint a picture, obviously, we talked a lot last year about the post-COVID collapse and promises of 2025 being a more positive year. Did we see that, do you think?
Yeah, I think, going from sort of survive 24 to thrive in 25 or whatever the saying was when we were around to kind of
Yeah.
develop 18 or so months ago, and then as soon as we entered into 25, there was some major layoff announcements, and they haven't kind of
Yeah.
let up at all really over this year either, which is super unfortunate for those people that have been affected. But what I will say is that it feels like it's only really kind of affected the very top end of game development. And by that I mean the big kind of like parent companies, right? I fully appreciate there's lots of smaller studios that have been affected as a kind of like knock-on effect of being partly
Mm.
owned or having publisher relationships with big labels and things like that. So I fully appreciate that smaller and indie studios have been affected by that too. But it's understanding actually that there's still loads and loads of opportunities available in the game dev space. So
Yeah.
if you have found yourself in that unfortunate situation where you have been laid off or been made redundant, or you're trying to break into the industry for the first time, or looking for your next project, whatever situation it is that you find yourself in, there is quite a few opportunities still available. I think the thing that I'm coming up against the most, however, is the type of people that studios are either looking for or feel like that they are currently
Mm.
lacking. Um, and it's very much on the soft skill side of things. I think roles
Interesting.
that I represent for studios, we get loads and loads of applications, obviously, with the current market the way that it is. And there's no doubt that 99% of those people could do the job with their eyes closed from a technical standpoint, i.e., they understand Unreal Engine or Unity Engine, up to a very good degree. They're fantastic artists. They understand, Blender and ZBrush and Maya and all of those other platforms to a really, really high degree. Um, when I kind of propose those types of candidates to these studios, though, the thing that we always get back is around kind of um, how they present themselves, who they are as a person, how they would see them fitting in with the team, the way that they communicate, and it's all very kind of subjective things that you might not be right for that studio, but you might be the perfect hire for the next studio, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
So
yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because from you're seeing this from a kind of recruitment perspective. I think it's incredibly interesting. I'm slightly more seeing it, I guess, from maybe outside looking in at the rate of people who are getting investment, or maybe the people are trying to get funding from publishers, for example, and also if you think about kind of like the market changes as well. So when we've had these kind of like big closures, which I think we only had one the other day. We've got I think the most recent one I remember was Square Enix. Recently, just decided they're going to close significantly. Change of business, change of infrastructure. We've had this fundamental shift in the way teams operate. I think some of that seems to be around optimizing the previous era's M&A. So big groups streamlining down the teams. That's one aspect, I think. But I think also we've had teams that have been trying to work on games, but the competition levels has, I think, dramatically increased. The cost of acquisition massively increased. That doesn't mean people stop loving games, but I think we've not seen a significant improvement in the kind of ability to find users. The discovery part, I think, has been problematic. And I'm not saying this is the same thing, but when we've seen general internet, the enshittification of search engines, for want of a better phrase, that I think is a kind of symptom of a wider rot in the way. I'll give you an example. So the equivalent we've had in mobile games in particular have been ad companies that have been taking a 30-second ad break and making it 60 seconds, and then making you play a playable for another 30 seconds, and then sticking you on the store page for another 30 seconds. So, I mean, I'm exaggerating for effect, but basically, there was a point where we were seeing an average of 90 seconds in order to get the reward in a rewarded video. When I know from my previous life as a Unity evangelist doing ads that it was actually better to get people to spend less time on those ads. Otherwise, you affect the lifetime value of the player. Ad companies aren't motivated by the lifetime value of the player. They're motivated by the revenue that comes from the ads that are shown. And so bigger games that have more momentum and more retention are going to be the ones that are going to have a bigger scale, and therefore they're going to get more value for the game by having those longer ads. You could argue. So my point is, I think that there's been a concentration of, not power, but concentration of value in existing larger companies, but within smaller numbers of games. But that hasn't stopped us making more games than ever.
Yeah.
And I can kind of see I mean, do you think, I mean, am I making any sense? I mean, it feels like there's a tension that we're not resolving.
Well, I think you need to take into account a very simple fact is that the top 10 most played games in 2025, 6 of them were at least 10 years old. So,
well, Newsy went further. They said of people's playtime, only 12% was in new games, and something like 57% was games 6 years or more. 57% of game time.
So you think about like how much people, how much time people have invested in, Warhammer, for example, League of Legends, Dota, Counter-Strike. Like these are years and years and years of gaming.
Be still my heart, Counter-Strike. I still in love with game. I love telling people how we bought them some new computers in '99, and the game being still there 26 years later.
It's crazy.
Makes me very happy.
So when you take into account that, as you said, like 57% of people are playing games that are 6 years or older, and I would probably hazard a guess that it's probably games that are even older than that. If I'm perfectly honest with you, like vast majority of the most played games in the charts right now are at least 10 years old.
RuneScape, LOL.
Yeah, exactly. And then but then that also doesn't factor in the investment.
Well, Roblox as well. Let's not forget Roblox. I mean, there's something, we should get into Roblox in a bit, but
You need to factor in that people playing franchises as well. Like that doesn't necessarily come into those statistics because obviously they release a new game every year. But there are people that are forever going to play FC 26, 27, 28. They're forever playing the new Madden or the new NFL, NHL game. We've just had the latest release of Football Manager, which, aside
Yep.
from last year, has been an annual and yearly release where there is a
Absolutely.
dedicated space of gamers that just play that game exclusively, and that's where all of their hours go.
Absolutely. And once upon a time, Football Manager was the most cited game in divorce courts.
It was, yes.
Which I still
Yeah,
love.
I remember. Yes, I remember reading that statistic. That was a great
Yeah,
fact.
I remember Miles telling me
Yeah.
all about that. It was fantastic. But anyway, so I think we're making, I think, a really important point. However, I think it's also a really important point for us to remind ourselves that not to get too disheartened. There is still a very thriving subculture of indie game lovers or smaller game lovers, and I'm the live ops free to play guy. I don't think that's something that necessarily means that all games have to be big, or you can still have smaller games, you can still have interesting games, and actually not all live ops games need to be big either, to be frank. But what I think is interesting about this all is if we're going to have a balance between these much loved nostalgia driven experiences and have a healthy new pipeline of content, we need the ability to be
Yeah.
found as a new game. And I'm not sure we've got great systems right now for that.
Yeah, I think Steam, or Valve regularly release how many games that they've had,
Yeah,
pop up on their platform over the last 12 months.
yeah, something like 18,000
It's
last year
crazy
or something.
numbers, but
Yeah,
I think again, when you boil it down to the discoverable games, and by discoverable, or
yeah,
certainly Valve's definition of discoverable, is that they have at least I think, is it 100 reviews? It's at least 100 reviews. It's
yeah,
actually only 1,000 games, and then
yeah,
boil that down even further into like how many of those 1,000 games actually receive positive reviews and were at the top of the store page. The number gets even smaller
yeah,
again. So I think that
yeah,
discovery, I think, is a code that can be cracked with the
yeah,
right people behind it. You need community prior to launching. You need marketing budget.
yeah,
You need people to be able to push it organically, so people see it. Yes, and there's a huge amount of effort that goes into that. But be mindful, like game creators that might be listening to this right now. Be mindful that almost 99% of the games that are released on Steam don't have that. So if you are that 1%,
no, they don't have any momentum.
exactly, if you
Yeah,
are that 1% that has that momentum and has that community behind you, then you stand a really good chance of being discovered organically by people that you've never even met
yeah.
before.
And I think there's a commercial mindset, there's a creative mindset, there's a professional mindset, which I think goes into that. Not saying, I mean, look, I was working with a game where we had a great game. It had 89% positive rating. We had a day zero patch that took that down to 40% because it was buggy. That wasn't an unprofessional team. That was a team that created a great game, but we made a mistake of getting that patch, to the standard it should have been at, and that happens. These things happen. They're not great. They can be traumatic, but they can happen. That being said, I'll give you a better example. I mean, a more positive example, more optimistic example. RVC has invested in a game called Roadside Research, over 300,000
Mm,
wish list. This is a crazy game that's got this hook where you're an alien with a paper bag face.
yeah,
I mean, it's just gorgeously simple and incredibly interesting. Just, you're going to play an alien running a gas station in order to do crazy research on
yeah.
humans. What's
It's
not to
great.
love?
It's great, and some of the best games of this year have had a really really simple uh, mechanic,
Yeah,
and but then have just been beautifully executed. I think one of my
yeah,
favorite games from this year so far. I say so far, we're almost at the end of the year, but probably one of my favorite games from 2025 overall has been Dispatch by Ad Hoc Studios.
yeah,
Um, Beautifully voice acted, really, really simple mechanic. It's very reminiscent, I would say, of the type of things that, not in the same genre, of course, but the similar sort of gameplay style to what Supermassive produce, in that it's
Yeah.
a playable comic book strip slash, adult cartoon that you might see on like Amazon Prime, for example. Huge
Yeah.
crossover appeal, but the gameplay and mechanics are super simple. It's literally just a decision tree game with really simple kind of resource management, I guess you might call it.
Yeah. Great.
Mechanics, great. And I've lost 20, 30 hours in it already. It's only been out 4 weeks.
Yeah. Well, I've just finished Outer Worlds 2 and I loved it and it was great. That's a bigger game, admittedly, a sequel to your point. But I think there is something, that shows that there is a healthy economy out there of games that can be successful, and at all scales. So with that in mind, we're coming back to that first point you've said, which is we've had this kind of crazy level of difficulty. I mean, I know people who have literally been out unemployed for months and months, and given the volume of new students that are coming out, I was doing a lecture the other day for the students at University of Surrey. When we think about the volume of new students, good quality students are out there, getting compared to a few years ago, getting so much better quality education in terms of what game developers and what people need. At the same time as there are now more people who have experience working in games, waiting to find their next job in games. Some of them having to go off and getting make do
Mm.
jobs whilst they're waiting for their games job. What do you think? I mean, do you think this is something that are we in a systematic problem stage, or do you see those kind of hopeful turnarounds
Well,
coming?
listen, I think that the university kind of pathway is a completely different or separate issue altogether, and this is something that I
Yeah.
really want to see some big changes made
Mm.
towards that. And I'm working together with a group of people that hopefully we will be able to make an impact in that area. Um, you know, I'd like to say pretty soon, but also I understand that these institutions take a long time to make changes.
Yeah.
Um, but I think working both agency side and working internally at game studios, and I've encountered many graduates. I've done guest lectures at universities. I've seen firsthand what the courses are all about, how they're built and how they're delivered. Um, and I would say that yes, there are some brilliantly skilled, very intelligent, very enthusiastic graduates up and down the country that enter the market every summer.
Yeah.
Um, However, the professional kind of viewpoint of those graduates or of those courses, moreover, is that they're not fit for purpose. There are a handful of, I will caveat and say there are a handful of universities.
I'm less convinced of that
Mm,
now compared to how I was
mm,
pre-COVID. I do think there is a massive gap, but also I think there's a fundamental mismatch, which is an expectation of essentially technical lot type, what's the word I'm looking for? Functional degrees, as opposed to degrees that help us explore and understand what games are. And I'm frustrated as a rather than as a practitioner frustrated, although I have some of those. I'm frustrated that we're not teaching fundamental game design principles like uh, basic
mm.
economics that's necessary if you're going to learn how to do game balancing. And I don't mean that kind of like I learned that stuff by being a marketing student. I happen to be an obsessive game maker, but I can see the dots. But what I find again, what I'm saying is that I'm 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 more positive about many of the courses than I used to be. I don't think we're quite there
No.
yet, but I also think we run a risk of fundamentally forgetting what a university course is about, namely teaching you how to think, I would argue, and instead teaching you set skills which have already changed by the time you get into that employment.
Well, I think that's the interesting thing with the games courses
Yeah.
is that fundamentally the skills and the platforms don't change. You can go in to a 4-year course tomorrow and try to learn or be taught Unreal Engine and come out in 2029 and Unreal Engine will still fundamentally be the same thing. It'll have different features.
Will it
It'll have
though?
different
Will
features
it
and
though?
upgrades and things like that, but fundamentally it will more or less still do the same thing.
I don't know. I think in the current climate, I'm not convinced of that. And again, I think it's a really interesting conversation. I've got lots of reasons why I'm interested, because I think with the advent of vibe coding used for prototyping, which by the way shouldn't be used for real games, because maintaining and managing, in my opinion, again, argue with me, but I'm happy to be argued with. It will be an unfathomable spaghetti mess. However, I think there's some fundamental changes the way we look at what coding does. For example, what we see scripting being, what we see, in fact, the fundamental principles about. But I'm usually the guy on your side of the fence saying a lot of these skills say the same. So I think there's a dynamic tension going on. Do you think
Yeah,
that's fair?
I think that's very fair, and I should also caveat that this is not my belief that it's all universities and all courses.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
I'd be remiss to not say that the University of Portsmouth, for example, incredibly well regarded by the industry. The
Yeah.
students that they've put out into the market over the last 3 or 4 years are all, award-winning students. They are,
Yeah.
and the university itself is an award-winning university. So it's
Yeah.
recognised, it's peer-reviewed, it's been recognised by the industry as being one of the best. And there are a handful of other universities that are like that also. I would put UCA up there,
Yeah.
for example.
Yeah.
Very much so, and that only happens because of the work of some individuals that have really really good
Yep.
industry partnerships, like Andy Bossom, for example.
Yeah.
The
Andy's great.
stuff that he's been able to do with, again, second mention with for Supermassive, giving them written briefs and allowing the candidate the students to work on real live game, like in-game narrative and assets and things like that is amazing. Opportunities that, as I said, a vast majority of university graduates don't get. I think my biggest concern is that we're talking about a very small handful of people in the grand scheme of the last report suggested that there were upwards of 4,000 graduates entering the market. And
Yeah.
as of this morning, Games Jobs Live had 12 entry level roles available, which is just
Yep.
incredible. Like it represents
Impossible.
2.5% of the jobs available in the market, and 12
Yeah.
jobs to go between 4,000 graduates that graduated just this year. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
No, totally.
unsustainable in that
And
sense.
that's ignoring the other people who are trying to change roles in the industry, trying to, there's so much
Yeah.
competition in that space. And I think it shows a fundamental kind of mismatch between, no, don't get me wrong. I actually think that it's okay for somebody to learn these skill sets with the ambition to do games, and maybe they don't get the games job straight away and they go and do a non-games job for a while, or even they find that those skills that they learned from doing games make it possible to make other things more interesting. The amount of coders that learn so much from game thinking in terms of building better UX, better user experience for devices. My goodness, please, can some of the banks please hire games design people to make just the management of getting into online banking would just be so much easier if somebody actually thought about player experience. Sorry, just being touchy there.
Gamification of your finances. I think we're getting into.
Well, I don't necessarily mean gamification, but just the sheer understanding of
Yeah.
flow. Yeah, and little things that we teach people instinctively without realizing we do. Now, I mean, I won't. At the risk of going down a tangent, I won't go down this too far. One of the things that really sort of lit me up this year was one of the frustrations I've got, is that we do not have any consistent language about the skills or the roles in games. And we are one of the very few industries that hasn't bothered to do this properly. I say bothered because I'm trying to be inflammatory to people who think we have, because I want to fire them up to actually do something about getting it adopted properly. Anyway, now it turns out a friend of mine, Christian Roberts, who did the design for the VGTA, was hired to do exactly this work for film
Mm.
and TV, and he's got an open brief in the games industry for screen skills. He just needs someone to say yes, they want it and they can get it funded. And this is frustrating me because of a whole bunch of reasons, not least because in Helsinki, in Finland, university, I forgot which university it was. Anyway, one of the Finnish universities has just done a whole series of work around this topic called game badges, where they've matched roles and skill sets in standardized ways. Not necessarily perfect. It's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. But the reason I care about this stuff is because if we are going to hire people efficiently, shouldn't we be using similar language? If we're going to retain people effectively, shouldn't we be able to have similar language in the way that we recognize their skill sets and their improvements and progress? And the point I'm getting to, and again, feel free to freestyle all the way around this subject, I think we are going to have a massive skill gap because we're not training juniors to become seniors. And I don't mean leadership. No, I mean the skill of the job.
Yeah,
What do you think?
100% agree. I think if we're not bringing juniors and graduates into, I mean, let's be honest, the ones that can afford to do so are the larger studios, right? They are the ones that have the
Yep,
structures and the infrastructure to set up, and
yep.
they have the senior leadership team there to tutor and mentor and whatnot. It feels like at the moment that the advice that young people are being given is, you're not going to break into the industry because there's not enough roles available, so just start your own
Yeah.
studio. Well, what kind of advice is that to someone that has got no commercial experience, probably has very little in the way of work experience whilst being at university? Like their literal only experience of creating anything is being taught how to do it. Like they don't have that lived experience. They have to kind of like fumble their way
But
through.
Darren, they can look at my videos. They can look at there's a dozen of us who do how to make game. And I'm kidding, obviously. It's a nightmare. But I do think it's again, this is the half the problem, is that we are giving the best advice by saying go make games. I mean, that is honestly the best advice. However, you are exactly nailing the point that we're only giving half of the information that they need to realistically be able to do it. Does
Yeah,
that
for
make
sure. I
sense?
mean, the advice around like going make stuff is great if that it's going to fill your portfolio up with things that you then eventually get to show hiring managers and studios and say, like, this is what I'm
Yeah.
capable of and this is what I can do. That's great. I would never discourage anybody from doing that at all. I just think there's lots of people out there right now that say that, okay, I mean, even to the people that have been laid off, you've been
Mm.
laid off, you can't find work for 6 months, a year, start your own studio. Like, it's really easy to do. It's just not practical advice at all.
It's not. I mean, it's. I mean, don't get me wrong. I actually think that there's. I wouldn't say start a studio personally, anyway. But I think that if you want to keep your skills up to date, or you want to evolve your skills, making games is the best way to do that if you want to make games industry. And there's no question about that. I don't think that's necessarily the same thing as start your own studio. And a lot of people don't have the temperament for a studio, because half of the work of setting up a studio is actually a business role. It's not a game
Yeah,
making role.
agreed.
And so, to your point, I think what you're saying, if I'm interpreting it correctly, is the advice we're giving is being interpreted
actually do half of the thing that you want to do and do this other thing that you don't want to do.
Yeah, to some degree. Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a problem that was created by lack of opportunity. And what we then started to see was that actually some of those games were really, really good, and they did take off. And then these young people had the world at their feet with regards to income. The game was flying, and they just didn't then know what to do with it after that.
Yeah.
You mentioned Roblox.
The difficult
Yeah,
second
well,
album, as they
yeah, I
call it.
suppose so to a degree. But I mean, you mentioned Roblox earlier in the episode. I think I've seen several Roblox studios take off like an absolute rocket, and they're being managed and led by people that are no older than the university students that are entering the market right now. They're 20,
Yeah.
21, 22 year olds that do not have a foundation in running a business. This is part of the reason why I got involved with Mastered at the back end of last year and the early part of this year to create a course which essentially taught business skills to indie studio founders. That was the entire purpose of it,
Yeah.
and it was incredibly successful. We ran it in 2 different regions in the country. We hope to run it again in 2026 in various different regions across the country again as well. The feedback from the people that were part of those first 2 cohorts has been really, really positive. But it's taken an external organization to spot the problem and then come up with a solution. These are not major game studios or major universities or even government that are providing these solutions. It's people like myself, you, people like Mastered. There are other bootcamp providers, Infinity 27. There's loads of other people across the country that are individually taking this up as a problem to solve. And I
Not sure I'm doing much about it at the moment. I'm more trying to mentor where I can, and we were doing a thing called Indie Lab, but unfortunately the funding of that got cut. So I mean, hopefully that will come back
hopefully so.
again.
Hopefully so.
But the fact is that when you're dealing with organisations like governments who have to work out where they're going to put the funding, they have to understand that not just the impact it has on the games industry, but the wider impact that the games industry has across the piece. And I would argue the impact the educating people in that space has, the effect, that wider effect it has by creating a pool of people with talent and capacity and skills that are applicable wider than games.
Yeah, no, for sure. Just coming back around to your previous point about um, learning games tech and applying it to other things. Again, I would wholly encourage people to look for roles outside of games if that's
Yeah.
what puts food on the table and keeps a roof over your head and everything else like that. Um, because I do
Well, it,
believe that the games industry will recover. We will find ourselves in a position where there
yeah,
are plenty of opportunities, more opportunities than there are people available for them again.
yeah.
And we would welcome you back to the industry with open arms, of course.
I tell you, the only risk. I mean, again, I think you're absolutely right. I think you should. I think people will look at you weird if you haven't had a job for a long period of time. And that's not going to help your position. But equally, I do think we've got a little bit of a chip on our shoulder in the industry where we go, oh, well, you weren't working in games then. You're not one of us. I've literally heard people being turned down as not one of us.
It's really problematic.
I mean, is that widespread?
Not with the studios that I have worked with, thankfully.
Yeah,
Um, Again, that there is differences that need to be overcome when you're coming from outside the games industry and into it. One such example would be transferring from TV film into games, as an example. If
yep,
you're doing
yep.
VFX or you're doing Unreal Engine stuff, then the optimization piece is a really difficult thing to learn because you're coming from an environment in film and TV where
essentially optimization doesn't really exist, because the load bearing of what you can do is incredibly high. But then when you come into a game studio, the load bearing is incredibly low, and the optimization has to be at the forefront of everything that you create. But I believe it's a teachable skill. What isn't
Yeah.
teachable is the 4 years VFX work that you've done in Unreal Engine that creates
Yeah.
realistic looking water and smoke and fire and things like that. Like, all of those
Yeah.
things are transferable. It's just that the optimization piece is something that you would need to be taught, I guess.
So I think this kind of gives us full circle in this sense, because what we're saying is that we've got this whole range of talent that have been being let go, this huge amount of games that are being made, the talent that's more than the current capacity are being encouraged to go make games, which is feeding into that pipeline of too much content, which is then, and yeah, there's a whole bunch of cyclical argument going on there. But I think what we end up with, the risk we end up with, particularly where we aren't being clear about the definition of roles, when we aren't being clear about the definition of skills, and the lack of infrastructural, institutional learning that lets us get to the stage where somebody who is a junior at something can become a senior at a thing, whether or not they want leadership or not. I think it is most other industries. I remember being at British Telecom in '98 as the games guy, and I was on the managerial track. And my brother-in-law, who was working in tech at a different department, not games, was on the what's the word there? Occupational. I can't remember. There was a different track they called it. This is like 27 years, 28 years ago. IT mainstream was running the difference between your skill as your practitioner versus your skill as your managerial, and understanding that difference. I think it's only recently we've started seeing people seeing the difference between that in games. Is that fair?
Yeah, to some degree, I think, and also though those differences are really only then separated at much higher levels in the
Yeah.
industry as well, right? So, you'll work your way up from. I'll use animation as an example. So you'll be
Mm.
graduate junior, you'll be animator mid level or standard, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. I've never worked out what word to
Yeah,
use for that. Standard seems is
yeah,
animator.
just animator.
Yeah. No
Yeah,
prefix,
exactly.
animator. Yeah.
And then you get into
Yeah.
your senior animation. So someone
Yeah.
that's been there for a period of time, or you've got X amount of years experience in the industry. Um, some of the larger studios, and I would encourage some of the indie studios and indie founders that may be listening to this is to think about what you do with your people when they get beyond senior. An example that I will give, that Oscar kind of explained there as well, is that a lead animator is very much someone that has the animation skills, understands the fundamentals of animation, knows how to fix problems as and when they arise. But their main priority as a lead is to tell other people how to do it, or teach other people how to do it.
Yeah.
A print
And to drive that team
Exactly.
onward,
A principal
Yeah.
animator on the same like organizational level is someone that is a higher grade than a senior, but just maybe does not have the people leadership skills. So they continue to
Yeah.
be very much
Or
hands,
doesn't
or
want
doesn't
to.
want to. And will continue to be much more hands on in engine, in code, doing the animation itself to a very, very, very high level, able
Yeah.
to solve problems that nobody else in the business can solve, and then kind of where do you go from there?
Yeah.
You could argue that the leadership track is obviously has room to grow and move. You can go into
Yep.
director level, C-suite, studio management, art direction, whatever it is that you feel like you can go with that. the principal animator, though, I would suggest is like that's where they're comfortable. That's probably where they're going to stay. They're going to continue to obviously learn new skills and sharpen their skills, but ultimately they are always and forever will be hands on with the animation.
And they will be the ones winning the awards at the end
Yeah,
of the day, because they're the ones who are going to take their craft to the next level. And I find it frustrating because I know my skill set is more the management and kind of the strategic stuff. I just want to make games. I don't get to design games anymore, which is why I do actual plays and podcasts, because I get to talk about the fun of it. But I have to admit, I know that I'm not the best one at all those things. Um, and I think understanding where your path, where your track lies, it works. Now, the reason I raise that is because in this scheme of like looking back over the year, what I'm trying to get across is I feel like we're heading our way towards the canyon and the bridge is out. And to me, the bridge is out is that we don't. I think we're seeing a lot of very skilled people, because who leaves first when you have voluntary redundancy? It's the ones who already have
yeah,
the skill. And if that is true, if I'm right about that, and that is the people these bigger companies are losing, and yes, some of them are going to set up their own companies, whatever, but who is going to step into those shoes? And we have a history, I think, of having dead men's shoes in terms of the nicest possible way. Like when someone leaves, you get to fill in the principal job,
yeah,
and then you learn how to be the
yeah,
principal.
yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, I
Am
think
I?
depends on the studio, and it very much depends on the structure. I think we've seen a lot of. I mean, what you say is very true. Certainly for perhaps what we've seen at Microsoft and Epic in the past.
Yeah,
They kind of
yeah,
almost gut the mid level, and then immediately there'll be 100 job adverts out there for juniors and entry level people to kind of fill that kind of workload, I guess. Um,
mm,
it's but you're right. What you're doing is you're expelling a level of skill and knowledge for then the people below those levels are never going to be able to learn from, or never be able to
yeah,
extract knowledge from. I think what we're approaching now is a really, really interesting time in the games industry from a commercial point of view. Is that over the next, I would say, 4 or 5 years, we're going to see our first set of like commercial games retirements. And you think about
mm,
like the the people that started studios in like the mid 80s, early 90s, that are 40 years deep into their career at this point.
mm.
They're going to be getting ready to retire, and there's loads of people like that across the industry, across the world, where that knowledge is going to the knowledge that they have is going to evaporate, and there's not that many people that can step into those shoes with the same level of understanding and learning and knowledge, um, and that kind of cascades down. You take away the top, and then the mid level has to step up. Well, then there's nobody else to step into the mid level.
Well, you say that, but you immediately take me to someone like Chris Deering, who I believe is still out and about, and he's about 80 now. And an incredible character. And obviously, for those who don't know, Chris was involved with, was it Sony Europe during the PlayStation 2 era, I think it
The
was?
name sounds familiar.
I'm not
Yeah,
too sure. PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, but and then of course, we've got a whole bunch of people. So I mean, I'm thinking some examples of people you're talking about are people I know quite well, and well, some of them are, and you know, I don't know many of them who would even contemplate retiring, and yet I've seen some younger people actually taking a step back because they've reached that point in their career where they
mm.
can. Um, I think there's a lot of the folks who are like the leadership have this. It isn't just a job for them. I think that's one of the things that it's actually one of the beautiful things about the games industry is that for most of us, this isn't a job. This is who we
It's
are
a very, very good point.
in different. Yeah, in a different way than other. I mean, don't get me wrong. We've lost some amazing people. Who did we lose recently? Rebecca.
Hyman.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Hyman. Yeah, Rebecca Hyman. Yeah. When we lose, people like that through, cancer or other things, that's obviously hugely tragic. And we've had, our share of losses over the years. But we've also got this incredible kind of emergence of talent that appears to be overnight, but most of us know that they've been working at it for decades in some cases. So let's kind of like I said, we've been a bit doom and gloomy. So hopefully you kind of what we're trying to do is, I think, basically create a kind of leveling basis. I think what we have seen is now, I mean, this is an interesting one, the EA
Yeah.
acquisition. So I think there's a positive to it, and I think there's some very kind of big questions that go with it at the same time. The positive is our industry is seen as so valuable that we've had the biggest deal in history being done. The more questionable things is where that deal's been done from.
Yeah.
And now, don't get me wrong, I'm not, I've got any kind of prejudices in terms of the cultural influences in that space, but I do have some serious concerns over some practicalities of that particular kingdom. I know some people who work there. I know it's something I wouldn't choose to do for reasons to do with family who wouldn't be allowed to exist in that country. And I mean, look, I'm not going to kind of, I have done business with, people from that territory. I'm not going to, pretend that I wouldn't do business with people, but there is a line where I would not personally go. And I'm trying to turn this into a positive, but I'm failing miserably. But what I'm trying to get to is that this is an industry where we have got that complicated situation. I think it is a sign that we have a very positive industry that people want to be part of. Do you agree?
So I think first and foremost, the acquisition of EA, with regards to who is involved in the acquisition,
Yeah.
of course, people are going to have their opinions on it from a direction of the ethics side of things, and that's actually on both sides of the water. You could argue as well.
Yeah.
However, my viewpoint on it is that it will only encourage other people to invest in the game space if they are looking at that deal as being the biggest acquisition deal in the history of games. That uh, there could well possibly be another EA out there that is in a fledgling state that could really do with $30-40 million today to become worth 5 or 6 billion in 20 years time. And if that's the type of conversation that those deals encourage, then yes, I'm certainly all for that.
I mean, I think there are teams I can think of who could well do that
For sure.
with the right team, the right management, the right
Yeah, for
investment.
sure.
Yeah.
I mean, one such fund that I'm very keen to talk about would be Blue Ocean Games. There's a private investment fund there that's very much geared towards indie studios. They've got their Rising Tide challenge, which they invite anybody with a game trailer to come along and apply for. And they're doing some really really great work in the indie funding space. So
Well, on that note, I mean, Fours VC, which is the VC that backed our tech platform and the game I mentioned earlier, recently got listed as the most active in games in Europe, and they're a Belgian-based VC. So I mean, there are people who are being actively seeking out the bright and the beautiful and the different. In fact, the other night I was out with some other local to Guildford games industry people, and one of my old friends who I used to work with, who's working at a very big studio or big publisher, is currently looking to do interesting investments in different high quality experiences. And they're specifically looking to broaden their portfolio, and they have the capital base to do that. I think it's interesting that that particular team is looking at an equity rather than a traditional publishing model for
Yeah,
doing that
yeah.
as well. Which I think actually shows some really interesting. It's kind of partly you could argue that it could indicate a level of hesitation because they want to go in with other investors, but I think that's really positive because that's saying, hey, if these people invest in this scene, there are other people who are willing to follow. And in the UK, generally, if you're not talking to Nick Button Brown, not just Nick, by the way, Nick is seen as the figurehead on it, but Phil Mansell's doing a lot of work in the space. We've got a whole bunch of other interesting folks are doing some stuff with the UK Games Angels. Obviously, you've got Spike and Ian doing Hero Capital. There are a whole bunch of teams like Sisu, Play Ventures, etc. over in Helsinki. They're big craft. Anyway, there are tons of people out there who haven't stopped investing in
No.
games. They may have been
Mm.
slower. They may have been more selective, and maybe placing different kinds of bets, but they are still investing. And I think I'm feeling that level of willingness is increasing, but my take on it is then they're looking not for the 10x anymore, not for the $100 million game, but the billion
Mm.
dollar game.
It's interesting. I think if they're and if that is true, and if that is the case, then you can only hope that the initial upfront investment is a lot stronger. I've
Mm.
certainly seen investment conversations go very much the other direction in that
Yeah,
funds that were traditionally quite happy to put in $5, $6, $7 million into a um, equity partnership are now looking at uh, 200, 300, $400,000
yeah,
deals or pounds or euros deals because they're looking to make their money go further, and they're looking to make more smaller bets as opposed to one larger bet.
yeah. I mean, I think that's true, and I think that's where that collaboration, getting multiple people involved, is interesting. But then, of course, you've got the cap table split risk, which is an interesting conundrum, I imagine. I think what I feel like the other interesting thing is I'm seeing a bit more activity in kind of grants as well. Um, but I think the UK Games Fund getting a larger amount
Yeah.
last year, or
Yes.
last year,
We're
beginning of this
beginning
year,
this year.
anyway,
Yeah.
beginning of this year, has been a positive thing. I've not seen that much in terms of who's taken it up, but I've been distracted this year. Um, I do feel like the SAS EIS is still an incredibly powerful thing for the
Hmm.
UK scene, which is not present in other territories, and well worth it, exploring and involving it. But equally, I think we've started to see more options in terms of debt-based financing for those people who are different stages, like you're finishing prototyping, or you're kind of like finishing
Mm.
funding. Sorry, not finishing funding, or to support marketing promotional elements. So I think we are starting to see a bit. I don't know. I feel like there are options out there. Is the
Yeah, I think
fact,
there's but that comes with a greater understanding of the games market as a whole, right? So
yeah,
uh, financiers that are maybe traditionally outside of games can now look at as you said, 95% finished product and get excited about that product and understand that actually if we help them get this finished in 6 months' time when that's out on the shelf and generating revenue, we're confident that we're going to get more than our money
yeah,
back. Whereas maybe 5 6 years ago that wasn't the case because the education outside of the industry there was quite a lot of naivety really about what
mm,
good looked like or what what would sell and what wouldn't. I think the UK Games Fund conversation is also really interesting. I think the fact that they've been given more money than ever, as you
mm.
said, and the distribution as well.
I still have questions about why we're not getting a greater share of the media budget, but that's another subject for another time.
I think the way that it's been distributed as well is been really interesting to see. So they've worked a lot
Yeah,
closer this year than I've seen in previous years with Creative Wales and organisations like GameDev Scotland and
yeah.
things like that. So that we're starting to see a much
No,
more
no.
diverse range of investments as well, which is nice.
Yeah. I think Brian Baglow would like to see a bit more support for the Scottish economy, but that's another subject. Anyway, so I think there's a couple of interesting things that come out of that, though, which is one of the kind of directions that takes us down is how much responsibility is it on us when we are going to seek that funding. And I think that we have a tendency to say, look, this is a great game idea, give me money. Whereas what we need to be doing is saying, this is a great game idea, and I know that because I have this data to show that I'm not just making it up. It's not just a guess. This is an audience need I am satisfying, and I can measure that need. And I think Matt Spall did a great job at the To the Moon event. We may not have had the audience we'd like to have had, but it was great having Matt talking about our how do you phrase it? We need to know the first 100 players who are going to buy our game. You can argue whether it's 100,000, whatever else. The point being, our level of understanding of what it is we're making and who for, that's not ourselves. If we can't communicate that effectively, should we be given the money?
Yeah.
And maybe some of the reflection of why we have had so many fewer people feeling why a lot of people think there's not as much money out there. Let's put it that way. I think a lot of that is because the teams have become more discerning and require more proof. But I think that's been happening for a long time. I think we've been gradually getting to the need more proof for a
Yeah,
long
for
time.
sure, because they're trying to divest their risk as much as
Yeah.
possible, whether or not that's a VC or a publisher or whoever else, private angel investor or whatever. They want to see firsthand that they are more likely to get a return.
Mm.
Obviously, none of these things can be guaranteed. We don't know. I don't think that there's ever been a surefire, game of the year candidate, up front at game design stage
Well,
or vertical slice stage or whatever.
and if anyone out there thinks that there is one, I've got one to show you.
It's conveniently hidden behind the green screen.
Convenient hidden behind the screen. So I think what to kind of focus is kind of like the fact that not only has there been more competition, we are now being asked for more proof, but I think also we're going into a market where the environment has become more mature, I would argue. And I think this is reflected also in some of the legislation that we're having to deal with that's profoundly affecting the way we have to think as developers. Some legislation I think is profoundly badly written, but that's my opinion. I'm not a lawyer, but I have talked to lawyers and they don't think I'm completely off the mark. For example, the Online Safety Act. Which on its surface, of course, who doesn't want to protect kids? Except it won't, except it isn't. And the way it has been designed, where it puts the emphasis on the delivery, as in the game developer in our case, to do the ID checking, means that we're putting the skill set, the burden of security, the burden of safety and understanding on the people who are probably less likely to have that skill set. Whereas, had they put that requirement on the platform holder or the retailer, like it is in the physical world, where you go into the physical retailer, the retailer is responsible. Instead, we're not the retailer. We're using a retailer platform and we are wholesaling them our game. Basically, whether that's how it's worded in the contract or not is essentially how it's actually working. We get an anonymous ID. We don't get the person's ID. But all this information is actually kept by the banks. It's already kept by the platforms. And now we're going to have ways of demonstrating that Darren is over 18, and I've got to store that somewhere.
Yeah.
That's just an absolute recipe for the biggest phishing scam epidemic of all
Yep.
time. But that's just one of them. We've now got the Digital Fairness Act that's being proposed in Europe. And in that, it's going to make, I hope this never doesn't happen, but I'll just give you an example of the depths that we're facing in this space, where we're essentially being told that we have to give a value to virtual currency that has no cost.
Yep. I posted
That,
about that when
yeah,
they announced the DFA, and of
yeah,
course the comments went wild with
yes.
no longer will mobile games be able to scam young kids and everything else like that. And I think the it
You don't get how people are going to misuse the
it's
language of it.
you
I mean,
misuse the language of
yeah,
legislation, but also that's not the problem that we should be talking about. The problem that we should be
no,
talking about potentially is why do one of the comments that I remember quite vividly is young vulnerable children won't be able to make virtual like online transactions anymore. And
yeah.
my response to that, although not publicly but certainly privately,
It's now.
was, well, why do young vulnerable people have access to a game
Yeah,
and a payment method preloaded onto that
yeah.
game mind that allows them to do that in the first place? That's the problem. That's the issue that needs to be solved. And this digital fairness,
And there's so many better ways of
yeah,
solving it.
it just and we just had the budget in the UK
Yeah,
here, and they're talking about introducing a tax on virtual currency exchanges. So if you want to buy Robux or V Bucks or whatever, like there's going to be a tax associated with that now. Well, vast majority of the people that are buying these things, okay, yes, first and foremost, it should be the parents, um, but it is younger children that have an allotted amount, say it's their pocket money or whatever. They don't
yeah.
understand tax. They don't understand how that works. Like
No.
you're punishing and penalizing the wrong people.
But it's already a tax inherent in the purchase.
Yeah,
VAT exists
yeah.
already. And so we're double taxing, basic. I mean, maybe it won't end up being that bad. I don't know. I've not had a chance to really understand the pieces. In a couple of few days' time, they'll be heading over to Wigan. One of the law firms has an annual gaming event. I'll be hoping to find out more when I talk to folks like Celia Pontin, who I've had on the podcast separately. But I think maybe if we take this back, what I think is interesting is there is a a, a huge amount of pressure being put on the game development community, often through misplaced, well-meaning
Mm,
legislation. And um, I'm actually one thing I think we have got going for us is historically in the UK we've had separate parties, the Tiger, the Yuki, various other people trying to affect legislation. At last we have a single voice. Now there have been growing pains for that single voice, the UK Games Council. The growing pains, I think, are part of the history of where we are, and um, other people kind of expecting that body to do more than it's intended to do. But what I think we need is for government to see that games speaking with one
mm,
voice. And as much as I kind of feel sorry that for Nick Button Brown, who's currently chairing that, I am so glad it's someone like him who actually wants the industry to thrive. And so I think that is a positive news story. I mean, it's still a long way to go, and it is an
mm,
impossible job, and there will be more, frustrations that people will vent on that job. But I hope people bear this in mind that we missed out on what I would call a properly equitable share of media funding compared to film and TV. When you, if I'm right, that equitable would have been something that relates to the proportionate benefit to the economy that our industries provide. Games is the single largest form of digital entertainment on the planet,
Yep. Yep.
bar none. We were not the recipients of the single largest share of that grant. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean we should have been the largest, but my gut feeling is we're not seen. It's an indication that we're not seen by government as being as impactful on the economy as we are, because I don't think we're just impactful based on our commercial numbers, but the rate at which we train
Mm.
people who have their value contribution across other industries as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. I would suggest or say that really over the last 6 to 9 months, I have it's been quite refreshing actually to see there's been a number of MPs stand up in the chamber and talk about games.
Hmm.
I think I've
Yes.
seen
Yeah.
more speeches by MPs for Edinburgh and Guildford, for example, talking both
Yeah.
positively and potentially negatively about the effects of games or the games industry in their area.
Yeah.
Um, but it's twice more than probably what you might have seen in the last 5 years. So these
Yeah.
voices are starting to be heard in the chamber, which is lovely to see. But there's a lot of work to be done to get people at that level to understand the impact that games does have on the UK economy.
Yeah.
Um, in one hand, we have a prime minister that wants to encourage AI and tech startups to land here in the UK and to take advantage of various different tax benefits. But at the same time, and again, happy to see that in the budget announcement, there was a U-turn on the decision, but the original decision was that they were not going to extend VGEC. Um,
Yeah.
as I said, glad to see that decision was U-turned, and even better than that, some pretty significant improvements were made to VGEC as well going forward,
Great.
which is great to see. But it's coming back around is just that it's that naivety for people outside of the industry. They don't understand the impact on the economy, and as you rightly said, Oscar, they don't understand the impact that games has on the training of individuals both in and outside of the games industry for things like TV, film, general tech. If you've
Yeah.
gone to university and studied game development, chances are you've learned C Sharp, C++, Python code. And
Yeah.
if you've not then landed in the games industry, you've probably landed in a tech startup, AI, software development role. And that comes off the back of the fact that that person or individual initially intended to learn how to make games.
Absolutely. And I was part of the Jordan Game Summit for several years, and Noor, who's one of the guys who organises that, works for the King in the process and advocates games, and they see the games industry as the driving force behind their economic revolution, essentially, that they're trying to create in their country.
Amazing.
Um, why aren't we seeing the same thing?
Well, I just think it's very much indicative of maybe it's a Western culture, it's a Western media thing. Um, in fact, it's quite highly ironic, actually, that coincidental, actually, I will say, coincidental. I was
Yeah.
rewatching season 4 of Stranger Things, ready
Oh
for
yeah.
season 5 to start this evening. And there's an episode in there where they're talking about Dungeons and Dragons, D&D, and there's a big front page news splash on a national newspaper saying it's cultist, it's satanic, this is a game
Yep.
that you shouldn't let your kids play,
Yep.
it's the root of violence in America and everything else of that. Fast forward to
Sounds
Fast
familiar.
forward to 1996 when Grand Theft Auto first hit our shelves, and then again when we've
Yeah,
had games. To be honest, the entire Grand Theft Auto series, as it has
yeah,
happened over the last 30 years, that same headline seems to get troped up, and
every year.
but that's the lasting image, and that's the lasting message that people have, particularly in the UK, particularly in the US, that games are bad, and people that play them are either somehow uh, bad people or will become bad people, or they're socially awkward, or
Yeah,
there's no benefits to playing games.
exactly. I was told I was always going to be stuck in a dark place under fluorescent light, and that was all I'd ever amount to. Actually, pretty
Uh,
accurate.
so,
It's called an office. Anyway, sorry.
sounds like you're on the tanning bed way too often.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so let's. But we are in a better place. We are a phenomenal industry, and I think as we move forward to the new year, I think that we've had a lot of things to get over, but there are going to be opportunities
For
in this
sure.
space, and I think that opportunities are going to come down to with great opportunity comes great responsibility, for want of a better paraphrase. Or mixed metaphor. The where I think is, if we do want to move forward, we need to take ownership of how we prove our capacity as an industry, but also how we can prove our capacity individually. We are going to be going up against lots of competition, well, because we are a competitive and an innovative industry that people want to be part of, and thus has always to an extent been the case. This is a peak of that. This is the worst period I've ever seen, and it's lasted way longer than I expected. But I think we have seen improvements. I am seeing people getting new jobs, but I am still seeing a lot of very talented people who I know personally are great at their job, who have been unemployed for more than
Mm.
6 months. So I think we're uncharted territory for the industry. I don't know personally where I think it's going to land, but where do you think it's going to land?
Oh, that's a big question. I think that over the next 2 to 3 years, we will see a disbursement of traditional games hubs in the
Mm-hmm.
UK and USA. Um, we will see game studios starting in different towns, different cities, different regions of those two countries, mostly because they have to. The cost of creating games on the west coast of America and in and around London right now is completely unsustainable, particularly for startup studios. So I would say to those people that are looking for roles, you know, look out for those types of opportunities. Understand
Mm-hmm.
that studios outside of those major hubs will start to spring up, and they do already exist. You can look at places like Cardiff as an example.
Yep.
Pretty significant hub for games in Wales, and doing some pretty amazing things away from
Yep.
the sphere of London and Leamington Spa and Edinburgh. Um, I guess even Brighton to a degree actually now as well is becoming a bit of a hub, isn't it?
I think Brighton's always been a bit of a hub for games, to be fair. But I mean, the team that run Creative Wales, I've always found them really, really positive. For example, I think at GDC, yeah, GDC Wales have their own
Yeah,
stand, which, I mean, in public spaces as well. It's like amazing. I think with the Gamescom, I think they might still have, but I think the Wales team have a Gamescom space in the public area as well. But I can't remember. It's been a while. I'm going to chuck one more positive, as I've just thought about. You mentioned Roblox and those kind of things, and the cost of making games being high because the
yeah,
quality bar has gone up and up and up and up. However, what I think is really fascinating is this legal output of what's happening in Epic versus Apple versus Google, and the consequential reduction in the cost of the share that the platforms are taking, but more importantly, their inability to stop you from signposting, from their inability in the US only, by the way. It's not happening in Europe yet, not happening in the UK yet, and there are still contemplation of not such good terms in Europe, which I think is a thorough mistake if Europe let them get away with it. But if teams can start signposting, selling on their own tools, it's going to be an absolute bonanza for the Roblox style experience. Because one of the things I think has been holding back the Roblox economy has been the fact that there's a 30% share in everything that's going out before any other splits can happen. There is a risk we end up with a Spotify like experience where we remain having a kind of a birdseed level of payment out to the creator. That's a possibility. But I think it's opening up a door for new kinds of stores, new types of connection, where we can actually have these kind of low level, easily accessible experiences, which are loved, which are the norm for 100 million people a day.
Yeah.
Think about that. And they aren't as expensive to make. So if the revenue share can suddenly become more accessible, we'll see a quality bar of that go up. But I think we'll start seeing games like that being more accessible using other tools, not tied to your PC, not tied to your console, not tied to your device. But I've been saying that for years and it still hasn't happened.
A couple of big announcements that came out from the Roblox Developer Conference earlier this year. I think it happened in September, I want to say, or maybe beginning of October. 4K resolution assets are coming to Roblox as a platform.
Great.
And I think that once those go live, if they haven't gone live already, we will start to see AA, AAA studios starting to use Roblox potentially as a concepting platform. I would not be surprised if we were to revisit this conversation in a year's time, and studios like EA, like Rebellion, like Creative Assembly, for example, are not creating games for the Roblox platform, and not in a AA, AAA manner of graphic fidelity or playtime experience or whatever. It will purely be to see this game mechanic that we've come up with, or this game design that we want to insert into our next big title. Does it work? Do people want to get involved in it? Where can we play test this? Where can we concept this in a really fast way? Roblox would be the platform to do that.
Yeah. But actually, I think I'd go even further. I think why then even build a larger game? Because if it's all server connected, it's all could be done in the same space. If only the console platforms had thought about doing this before. If only Sony created a virtual world which had all the capacity to have game development that would allow you to have full quality spec games operate and have a commercial model that allowed you to oh wait, they did. It's called PlayStation Home and they closed it down 10 years ago. Sorry, I'm not bitter. I was Home Architect. That was my baby. Well, it was one of mine and many other people's baby, but I feel like vindicated and also crucified by the whole situation because we had all of that we launched it in 2008.
I think it was before its time, Oscar, before its time.
To say the least. I'm not bitter and twisted and old. Darren, on that note, what's any last thoughts before we close off?
Yeah. So I would say that heading into 2026, I think probably the biggest shift that we will see in terms of hiring practices for both candidates and studios will be community-based hiring. I think we've mentioned on this episode several times that there are thousands of people that have been laid off over the last couple of years that are just out on the market, adding to the thousands of graduates and entry-level people that are out on the market too. The only kind of sustainable way forward is to engage with that talent as early as you possibly can, even when those roles are not currently available or open. But when they are opened, you have a good kind of top 10 people that you can go to straight away because you've already had that engagement with them. There are a couple of platforms out there that will allow you to do that. I would say Hidden Gem is probably chief amongst them in terms of what they're building is very much a community hiring platform. There are several Discord servers as well that I would encourage you to take a look at in terms of certain studios are running their own hiring Discord servers whereby they don't currently have live roles, but they are engaging with people on a meaningful level that when those roles become available, that they are going into those Discord servers as opposed to putting the jobs out live and in public view. So just be mindful of that going into 2026. If we do see a reduction in live open to public view roles, it will be because that studios have shifted toward a community hiring platform or methodology. That would be my
That makes sense.
That would be my prediction, and that would be my sense of what I'm feeling in the recruitment space right now.
Cool. And so I want to come up with some witty lines. So something like, listen to the Darren if you want to learn the tricks to thrive in 26. Yeah, I did that, didn't I? That's bad.
It sounds as good as anything else I've heard. So
it's time for us to get ready for the fix.
There we go. Yeah.
Okay, maybe not. We'll get there somewhere. Anyway, I've been your host, Oscar Clark. I'm easily found online, LinkedIn, and under the tag at Athanasius, Athanateus. Yes, it's an old D&D character. And Darren, if people want to find more about you, where should they?
LinkedIn would be the first port of call. Of course, you search the Gaming Recruiter, you'll find my company page. You search Darren Butler, I'm more or less will be at the top of your search page there, and you can also come and find me on Discord as well, at the Gaming Recruiter on Discord as well.
So this has been your Game Dev Local podcast, where we've been talking about the past and present coming up for the 26 era, where we're going to try and see, hopefully, a much more successful and thriving industry. And for those of you who've been waiting for so long this last year, stick with us. There's still more of the industry to come. And I still believe that we have an amazing space where we create amazing content. And if you're an indie, let's just keep at it, because that's where the innovation happens. That's where the ideas happen. If you agree with us, if you disagree with us, if you've got other thoughts, if you've got other questions that you want to raise about the state of the industry and what's happening next and what's happening in the future, then just go check out the Discord. And of course, you can always like, subscribe, follow, whatever the platform of your choice uses to elevate the voice of this podcast. Please do it, as we only get to do this stuff because people like you listen to what we're saying. Thank you very much. And until next time, this has been your Game Dev Local podcast.